Welcome to Don't Fuck This Up, the podcast answering the ultimate question, how the fuck did you land that cool job? I'm your host, Lauren Alvarez. Hello and welcome to Don't Fuck This Up. This week's guest is a strategist with deep roots in sneaker and streetwear culture, from designing her sold-out Club C with Reebok to present day at the helm of her own creative agency, True to Size. It's international sneaker icon, Jazerai Allen-Lord. Jazerai, welcome to Don't Fuck This Up.
And I say I don't fuck this up. So thank you for having me, Lauren.
My pleasure. Also, I know you well enough to know you're not fucking this up. You would take this, spin it on its head, teach it a couple of dance moves, and send it on its way. It's going to be good.
Yay.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely seen that things have been really busy for you these last few months. Before we dive into everything, how are you doing?
I just got off the road for 13 days, way to kick off 2024. And it's been intense for sure, but I constantly am reminding myself, this is the life you prayed for. This is the life you asked God for. And so I'm learning how to live it. Every single day, I feel like I'm just learning how to live the life that I worked for.
Yeah. And I feel like you have such a cool and storied and unique kind of ascent into your career. And now today as the CEO and founder of your own agency, True to Size, starting out early days, when I was, thinking of all the things we could talk about in this interview, I was like, oh my God, there's so much to cover. But I do, remember, back early days, you started out posting pictures on Tumblr of your sneakers, right? This was an early passion of yours. And I think that's something I hear a lot from listeners is that they want to figure out ways to turn their passion into their career, but also figuring out ways to not lose their love for it. I feel like if anything, you love sneakers more. Is that safe to say?
I think today, yes, there was definitely, especially in the place where we met. I mean, we've known each other quite a while now, but I was in a space where I was figuring out how do I love it because I had given so much to it that there were so many blurred lines. And I think a lot of creatives go through that of I love this thing, but when you work in it, there's this extreme consumption of that thing.
Yes.
And so it's how do I remain loving it while still putting the business around it? And I think that took me quite a while to come to terms within myself. But in today, yes, I can say I've gotten to a place where I love the product again. I'm a consumer and a joyful consumer. And I think that also has a lot to do with where the industry is today, because there's a lot more product to be excited about.
Yeah, definitely. And I saw you had said recently in an article that you can't, I think you said I can't be bothered chasing a shoe around the internet, something like that. And I'm too grown for that. Is that kind of your perspective now? Because I mean, there was a time where everything was have the hype sneaker, wait in line outside of the store, go online and try to beat all the bots. But where have you evolved to in your thinking now? Are you just it's about comfort or it's about one particular shoe? How do you kind of figure that out?
I think also when you've been doing it, I mean, as you said, I've loved sneakers since I was 11 years old. So I have a sneaker bedroom, a room for my shoes that there is also a bed in case guests come. But I think that you kind of collect these things, these relics over the years of memories of decades of your life. And so at a point, it's how many more things are there to get excited about? Or when the brand is dropping the same shoe 4 and 5 times in your lifetime, am I really excited every single time? And occasionally I am. The Brent 4 just came out in leather and I bought it again. And, I just bought the shoe 4 times in my life. I'm going to buy it every time it comes out. But I really love the stories. And recently we've seen so many women heroed in sneaker culture, the WNBA having a moment, and the stories are starting to feel far more resonant again for me, which makes me want to buy and kind of changes my perspective. I want to chase the shoe that means something to me. But to your point, I don't want to chase everything that comes out every Saturday. I don't have the energy anymore.
Yeah, who has time for that, please? Especially, I know you're not sitting home just eating chips when you're have downtime. What is boredom? You don't know. I don't either.
I don't know. I'm here trying to do laundry for the first time in February.
Totally. I mean, actually, very relatable. That was like our whole weekend was just sorting a mountain of laundry, and like it just never ends. It's like, what are you gonna do, especially after travel? I mean, thinking about like you touched on it. So, is the Bread 4, is that your favorite sneaker of all time? Do you have a favorite sneaker of all time? You said that there's memories related, so I'm guessing there could be kind of some overlap here.
I'm a California girl, so the Chuck Taylor. Well, I mean, that's the first shoe my mom couldn't afford with her, with being a single mom. And so I had like the little off-brand Chucks, but the Chuck Taylors, the Bread 4 absolutely was one of the shoes that I had when Zion was a baby. I bought that shoe and had it for a few years, and then Zion came into the world in 2002. So many shoes are connected to times in my life, and they just remind me of those. The De La Soul Nike SBs, I camped for those shoes. So it's just such yeah.
And you got married in a pair of those, right?
I did. I got married in those shoes, and ended up meeting Paz from De La Soul and styling him for a couple of years and developing a long-term friendship with him through those shoes. And so there are things I think that are so intricate, to who I am, that it's difficult to separate myself from the shoes and separate my emotions from the shoes.
Yeah, that really makes sense. I mean, you talked about like your mom not being able to like afford the shoes. You brought me back to like, I just had a memory of like, I remember the very first sneakers that I really wanted, and my mom like reluctantly looking at the price tag and being like, we could put these on layaway. And I remember like that was like my big back to school moment, is like, okay, I'm going to have these Air Max 96s. They're not that cool. But they were then. And like, I definitely was really excited just like in that moment to feel like I was going to belong to something. I don't even think I knew what I was going to belong to, but there was this moment for me of like, these aren't from Payless. These are big time. And I mean, I wore them down. I ground the soles into the ground, it's like wore them out completely. And then recently was able to like rebuy a very similar pair. And I was like, oh, there they are. So I do get that. Take me to like one of your earlier memories of like, what was one of your first like bigger purchases when it came to sneakers, and like, what did that feel like for you?
It was a Jordan IE 11 low, and I rebought that shoe years later at a resale shop in San Diego, my hometown. So it was very full circle and nostalgic for me. I put that shoe on layaway. I think that's a lot of our stories. I walked in, and I worked at the mall at Sears, and I walked over to Foot Locker, and they were $76, and I put them on layaway, and I paid $20 every paycheck, and was so excited when it was time to go pick them up and wear them out of the store and put my old shoes in the box. And all of that is not really a part of the culture anymore.
I know.
And I think it's, it's difficult to explain to somebody that has never been able to like walk into Foot Locker and buy a shoe. That's just not the vibe today.
And the smell of the like new shoe in the box in the store, and the trial socks, if you weren't wearing the right ones, were always really weird.
Now,
like,
and the little thing you put your foot in, right?
Oh, to measure. I remember that. I didn't know what that feeling. Like as soon as you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I remember what that cold metal and the things sliding. Now, if anybody like Gen Z that you're listening to this, you're like, what are these old kooks talking about here? There is a metal foot sizer. I actually feel like I feel like I need one of those after having a baby. Totally.
Put one in the
Yeah, I'll put a picture in the episode. Please click on the show notes if you'd like to see what this looks like. But yeah, it was probably, and I know you have 2 boys, so it's definitely for you. But I didn't know that my foot size was going to change when I had a baby, and that it might not go back. And that is an expensive. Yeah, they get longer. I thought they were going to get fat and then skinny. I was like, I can deal with that, but they get longer, and that was something that's a very expensive problem to have if you're a shoe collector like you are, like I am.
I mean, I can't fit a lot of these shoes. But I'm not selling them, and I'm not giving away. I'm like, these are my shoes. And to your point, maybe one day I'll get them again.
Totally. I'm like, can I shrink my feet back down?
Yes, exactly.
Talk to me a little bit about early career, because I know that like you were in, hoping to go into editorial, into journalism. And I remember you telling me the story back when we met years ago, but that you said print died. And I'd love to hear, like, what did you think it was going to be? And then what did you do at that moment when you realized, hey, that career I wanted isn't an option?
I thought I was going to have a column in Sassy magazine. Shout out
Dreams
to
can
Sassy.
happen. Yeah. Hello, Sassy.
Like, definitely a moment in time for the rebel girls of the 90s.
Yes.
And Jane magazine, I thought I would have. I would read Cosmo and Glamour because these were the publications that were available to us. Like the
Yeah.
woman who was between Teen Beat or like, these pull the magazine, pull the covers for
Yeah.
your wall type of moments. And like, what is womanhood? And I never really found a resonant voice in those publications outside of Sassy and Jane. And so that was kind of where I felt, oh, I want to be like Khadijah James on Living Single, but I don't want to talk about hip hop. Like I want to talk about women's stuff. And it was just like, oh, wow, there's 2006, I'm graduating and there's nowhere to write. I mean, publications are just folding left and right. And all of a sudden this thing called a blog exists. And, I kind of started, I was like, well, I guess I'm going to be a blogger, like whatever that
Yeah.
means. And I started at AOL and like doing freelance work, doing earthquake preparedness articles and pet adoption articles. So I would go to the Chatsworth Rescue Center and they would give me a list of animals that needed like a little ad and I would write up about the animal and how you need to come and take it home and take pictures of it. And yeah, that's kind of how I started in writing. I would post a lot personally on Tumblr. And I got married in a pair of De La Soul SB highs. And that picture of the shoes under my wedding dress just went viral on Tumblr. And the CEO of Kicks on Fire ended up reaching out to me on AIM. Shout out to AIM. What a time.
Yes. That's how I reached out to you to come on the show. Don't play. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. A little AOL IM. And he was like, hey, like, do you like sneakers? Is this you? And I'm like, yeah, that's me. He's like, do you like sneakers? Yes. Do you want to write on a blog? And I'm like, what is a blog? What is that? And he's like, I'm going to pay you to write about sneakers. And I'm like, fuck yeah.
Yeah. You're like, dream unlocked. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like, I'm doing that for free right now. Of course. So it was very serendipitous. And
Yeah.
I think what the advice I give people in coming into this industry is like, it's a relationships business and you can teach skill later. But, he heard of me from somebody else who saw this picture of me on Tumblr and was like, do you want to do it? And that's kind of how I started.
That's amazing. And you also had a long relationship with Kicks on Fire. I mean, that was like, almost 10 years, right? That you were writing with them. Yeah.
Yes. I started as a junior copywriter making $5 an article, and again, thinking I'm coming out of college to make $2.50 a word to go to $5 an article was quite a shock.
Yes.
And then I helped Khan build his business there and left as the director of operations and kind of just didn't know that media had a larger pathway. And I'm honestly not sure if for like women in sneakers, there was a larger pathway at that time. Yeah. And so I wanted to kind of go into a different type of storytelling, which is when I met you.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like, it can be really isolating to be like on an island of Jazerai where you're like, I don't see myself represented exactly in the industry. And there's something to be said about being, the thing you're lauded for. You're independent. You're, no one's met anyone like you. You're so different. You're so unique. But sometimes that can create a separation, when you're in those spaces and you look around and you're like, there is no other me. Like I am on this island and I'm kind of doing this by myself. And I feel like, that can be a really difficult thing to overcome when you're in industry. And I don't think this is, this is agnostic of the sneaker space or of journalism. I mean, this is really any industry. Like we walk into spaces and we look to see ourselves represented in those spaces. And when we're not, it can really make you feel othered. And I feel like a lot of your work has really centered itself on creating belonging and creating spaces for people who represent, multitudes who are not just like single faceted. And I think that's something really interesting. It's a through line into the work you're doing today. But even, back then you were starting to try to like put the feelers out there. Like, where are the other people? I know you're out there. Talk to me a little bit about like that desire to activate and to find, community in those spaces where there really wasn't any.
It started as like not a business mission. I was really looking for other girls, and I felt, to your point, super isolated. I had a strong sneaker community in the school I went to in college and, in my hometown, but there were very few women in those communities. And I would meet women at the sneaker shows, but they would be like Jen Twice in Florida and, Jay Cheyenne in LA. I was living in San Diego at this time. And so they would
Mm-hmm.
be all over the place. So when I was at Kicks on Fire, I really used my platform to attempt to rally up all of these women and try to create a community in the digital space for us, because we weren't finding that on our own in our hometowns. And we had Chicks on Fire, and we would feature like 50 women every week, my best friend Janae and I. And it came to a point where we had to put up like Craigslist ads to look for women. Like, we were just so desperate to find them. This is before Instagram
Of course.
existed. And, when Twitter was a place that you text your tweets into.
Yes.
And so there wasn't a lot of social as far as finding people that way. So we kind of went to the message board, the Reddit route, and we're looking for women in that way. And, collecting a small community of women who, and I think at that time we were really looking to be not the model, but the collector.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of representation for women, but it would be like paid women who would be in their boyfriend sneakers.
Right.
Or import, car show type girls who would be on the arm of a man.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't a lot of women being featured who genuinely loved the community and the culture. And especially women who worked in the business. But even at that time, just women who collected shoes. Like, there was no representation for that. So it started as just a passion project and looking to find a community. And now I would say, like, there's so many communities of women. Like, that piece, that pain point that we saw 15 years ago, I don't think is there anymore.
Yeah.
I think we still see a lack of communities being uplifted for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But women are doing the work. Women are like, we'll find each other. We'll
Yes.
find our own budget, and we'll create the space ourselves.
That's amazing too. And I think there's something about like that kind of online first community that was like such a big part of, I mean, I was definitely like an early internet kid. It's funny, my husband and I were talking about this last night, and he was not that way, but I was like, oh yeah, I had like a live journal. I had Friendster. he's like, what in the internet are you talking about? And we're the same age, but I was like, yeah, I was just like really, I was like using CSS to like make my page look cool and put the music on it and everything, like way before
little
that
sparkly drop downs on the
sparkly drop downs and sharing pictures of like my outfits or my sneakers or whatever. But that was like not normal. And I love that you were talking about Tumblr, because it like totally brought me back to like, yeah, that was like that was the original fit check. We were like, hold on. Here's my look. And bringing that online culture offline into, real life, like what were some of the earlier meetups or experiences that you were building out? Because that was that kind of experiential strategy or like culture moments that you were really pulling people in person for.
Oh man. We would start just meeting up at Dunk Exchange. That's like lightweight, not official meetups, but like, who's going to Dunk Exchange Vegas? Who's going to Dunk Exchange LA? Like, let's try to all get together and do it there. And then we would have like a breakfast or a dinner together after the show.
Yeah.
And then I would say that the first formal women's project I probably did was at Kicks on Fire. And we partnered with Millennium Shoes in Inglewood, and they allowed us to host the kind of Chicks on Fire event there. And oh my gosh, so this was maybe before 2010, maybe somewhere between 2009, 2012.
Wow.
And I had, women collectors out there. There was this woman named Aubrey and Gretchen who used to do like sneaker yoga. So they would do like these really intense or yoga poses in sneakers. I had a woman artist out there who did live art, and just a bunch of women coming out and hanging out within the store. I think they had a women's drop that day, and so it was thematic around that. But that was the first time I really kind of put a professional stick in the ground, I want to say. And said like, okay, well, let's formalize this if we can. We were really just like, I always say, throwing pasta at the wall at that time. Like, no idea what we were doing, just trying stuff a lot. Tuesdays, we would feature women on Twitter like throughout the day. So we would have Chicks on Fire and just constantly create threads once we got threads. But in the beginning, individual tweets about a woman and her journey in sneakers and introducing people to them through our platform on Kicks on Fire.
That's amazing too. And just thinking about like being featured on that would be like such a cool highlight for someone who was like, oh, I thought I was just doing this for me. Or maybe I'd go to the mall and someone would be like, oh, I love your sneakers. But like to be featured in a way where you are going to connect with new individuals in that community is such a cool, just like a cool thing to offer to others. I mean, talk to me a little bit about how some of like the past life positions that you held have maybe helped to define that professional approach and the lens that you have today, because you've worked in so many different types of environments and you've worked for yourself a lot. But you definitely have like a more specific approach. Thank goodness. You know, we all need more of that.
I think it was important for me to understand everything happening in the room.
Yeah.
And which is, going into the agency world was like, I know editorial, but I don't understand the strategic piece of it. I don't understand how business is sold. I don't understand the net 60. So, I didn't understand. I was telling a story from like editorial and doing all the fun creative stuff. But I understood that if I wanted to be more in sneakers, I had to learn more and to learn every factor of the business. So the strategy and the production and the KPIs and the marketing piece, digital versus real life user experience, how those things are hybrid, like all of those things were new to me. I kind of jumped into it wanting to make cool things and like wanting to bring people together and not understanding that at the end of the day, even when it is sneakers, it's a business first.
Yeah.
And so taking the time to kind of learn the business of it, I think really allowed me to see where the gaps were and kind of where voices were not being heard or where there wasn't a position created for a voice to be heard. And that really informed how I approached the work, and just taking a look at every single piece. I true to size, we use a process called checking the fit, and we check the fit between the talent and the product and the message and the audience and the environment that we activate in, and, really walk through each piece of those things. And I also noticed in the agency world that a lot of people wanted to tell a lot of different types of stories. And while I'm very confident and I think that I am that girl when I walk into the room, I also know I cannot tell everybody's stories. Like, I don't play soccer. How am I going to tell a CONCACAF story? I can't. Like, this is not intrinsic to who I am. So I just decided to go all in on what I know I could do exceptionally well. And that's tell stories for women and tell stories for my community.
I mean, let's talk about that confidence, because I think that you definitely do have, like, I am that girl, like when you walk in the room and there is a confidence. And I think that it's helpful. A lot of our listeners that's a question I get all the time is like, how do I get more comfortable? How do I get more confident? How do I put myself out there? Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the sources of your own confidence while you're navigating these larger kind of transitional moments? And then any advice that you have for folks who are trying to build their confidence?
I think for me, it really helped us to get real about what I was great at and what I wasn't. And I know everybody wants to do all the things. I meet with young creatives and they're like, yeah, I want to be the videographer and the art director and the script writer. And I'm like, you could be great at all those things, but at one, I'm sure you're amazing at.
Yes.
And I think one understanding what's the through line, like that's tying to your point, like all of these things together. And understanding that that's your mastery. And so going all in on what you can master and what you can focus on will really help you build that confidence. Because for me, it's like, I do the reading. I sit up at night and I read the industry blogs and the business blogs, and I pay attention to what's happening on the ground with the influencers and the kids, 42 now. So it's like, I'm not the demo. So it's staying present where I know that I'm great. And the other things, I cannot even entertain anymore at this time because it's too much energy for me. And if I want to feel confident, I have to know that I'm great.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not going to tell the soccer story because I'm not going to be great at it.
Right. But the other thing too is that the person to tap for the soccer story. You're like, I'm not that person, but let me tell you who is. And I think that it's also about like leveraging your network. Like, we don't get places alone. Like, we do that by like saying other people's names in the rooms that they're not in. We do that by tapping other people when we have opportunities. And I think you've always been really great about activating others around you and calling out what you are and aren't good at. And I think like scream that into a megaphone, please, because I really think that there's a lot of people who try to do everything, just as you said. And if you're doing everything okay, then you're doing nothing great. So it's like, hone it in a little bit, zero in on what you're excellent at, and then start to like really talk about what you're excellent at so that other people can tap you when it's your time to shine, right?
Absolutely. And, we say all the time in our shop that it's not the stories that you tell about yourself, it's the stories that other people tell about you. And when you're trying to do all of these things, you're not giving somebody a solid story to latch onto. And that was my problem with my content for a long time. This is like, yeah, I'm a mom and I cook and I like sneakers and I write poetry and I just, and people are like, okay, but like, I think people should be able to walk away with three things about you. So I try to frame the things that I put into the world around that. I want people to know that I care about my community, that I do women's work, and that I'm a sneaker mom. And that I think that outside of that, outside of that, it's all fringe fun and games. But this is where I try to remain solid so that when people think about me for a project or for a press opportunity or something, that they kind of keep it within this lane.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what would you say is the hardest challenge that you've had to overcome in your life, that has brought you to this place? I mean, because you are in a place where you seem, I'll say unbothered as a compliment, in a really good way, because there's just a lot of shit that gets hurled in all directions and you seem to be pretty good at dodging it. But can you talk about maybe some challenges that haven't been as easy?
Oh man, I think when I think about myself, I always think like everything I'm afraid of already happened to me. And so,
I love that.
Like, bring it on. That's kind of how I feel now. But I think that for me, it's been about watching myself recover. A lot of my friends in my early career, they call me like the comeback kid. Because they're like, man, like the whole world fell apart for you and you bounced right back. Like 3 years later, here you are again.
Yeah.
And that's like a reality I've been divorced. I've lost a child, I'm a single mom. There's just been so much in my life that has totally rocked my world. And there have been times I stayed down for a long time, but I think that it's about getting up and knowing that like, okay, well, I remember in the beginning when it was harder for me, I would tell myself I'd be like, oh, it's over. And then the little voice would say, you thought it was over the last time too.
Yeah.
Like,
totally.
So
I mean, yeah.
You thought it was over the last time, and this time you just forgot to pick up the dry cleaning. Like, you're gonna be okay, Jazz. You're gonna be okay.
Totally. I mean, and since you love poetry too, I mean, there's a spoken word artist, Buddy Wakefield, who I always love, and he has this great line where he says, hearts don't break, they bruise and get better. And he said, if hearts really did break, I'd be able to offer you confetti by now. Yeah. And you're like, oh yeah, so relatable, because it's like, wow, the times where I just remember feeling like absolutely destroyed, whether that was career related or relationships. And then it's like, it opens up some other avenue for you to kind of take things to a whole nother level.
Absolutely.
And I mean,
and I firmly believe that like God has a purpose and a plan. So when something is taken from me, I don't feel sad about it. I'm like, okay, well, it's not where I was supposed to be. And the right thing will come along at the right time.
Totally.
It's a patience game. It's definitely a patience game.
It is. And I think it's interesting because I really want to get into, the weeds on the things that you waited a long time for. But I'd be remiss not to mention a recent post of yours where you shared a very sweet gift that you were given for Valentine's Day. And I will say, as someone who also can relate to being told my entire life that I'm, quote, hard to shop for.
Yes.
Let's talk about sentiment when it comes to gift giving, because I'm not, you can share what it was, who gave it to you if you want, but like, I just thought there was something really special because it was obviously the sentiment and it was nothing to do with the dollar amount. And it really, it's like it touched me. I thought about it several times since I saw it. So,
thank you. I mean, listen. Let me get my Teddy. Let me get Teddy to join the conversation because he's here.
Teddy has entered the chat.
He's entered the chat. I think, as you know, I've been single for quite some time and like definitely in some relationship trauma in this business. But I've been seeing someone about a year and it's been going really well. And I think that I'm really sensitive to what it's like to date somebody like me who like has a very public profile
Yeah.
and does women's work. It can sometimes be a little spicy, but I think that what I really, really love about him is the very first time that we met, he's like, I'm not interested in getting to know Nerd Like Jazzy. Like, I want to know Jazerai. And so
Oh.
we spent a lot of time getting to know each other as humans. And I did tell him in our friendship that I always wanted this little Teddy Ruxpin and that my mom couldn't afford it. She was a 19-year-old single mom and she was trying to put clothes on my back. And so she's like, I don't have $70, $100 for a talking bear. I'm sorry, Jazz. Like, it's not going to happen. And so for Valentine's Day, he found this 1985 Teddy
So
Ruxpin.
cute.
So cute. It looks perfect. He went to go see 8 of them. And I mean, just like the effort and the intention to me is like, at this place in my life and my career, I can do the things I want to do for myself. I can buy the things I want to buy for myself. And what I've learned being single over the last 7 years or so is that oftentimes, like the financial gifts, the big moments, these big moments are like the easy thing in
Yeah.
relationship. It's the hard thing is giving you your time and
Yes.
your attention and your space to grow something. Like that's the hard thing. And so, yeah, I think this is just like, to your point, like the most extreme revelation of like what that looks like.
Yeah. And it's honestly like that sentiment and that thoughtfulness, that paying attention, like just knowing someone is listening to you and really hears you for what you're saying, not hears you and is trying to find the secret coded message. It's like cut away all the bullshit or the chaos and at its purest form. I mean, that's love, and I think it's really special. Like I said, it really touched me. I've got nerdy goosebumps now because I'm such a dork for romance, but like, I really think also.
I told him though, I was like, I literally told him, I was like, babe, it's a more of a personal interview tomorrow. And I think they're probably going to ask me about the Teddy. Only because I was like, I don't want to hype you. I don't want to hype you. But like, I've been single for a long time. So like,
Yeah.
this is a brand thing now. Like the Teddy Ruxpin was like the hard launch.
Yeah, who knew Teddy Ruxpin was going to hard launch in 1985 when that Teddy was coming off the assembly line? It was like, I've got a big mission, but I got to wait a while. Honestly, like shout out to this lovely human who gave you such a thoughtful gift. That was really, and I just loved it too, because it's like, you're right. Like you could get yourself like the Bottega bag that if you wanted, or you could get yourself the hard to find, Jordans that you want. But that is something that, was just like, totally not expected. And I think that's super special.
It's very easy for successful people too. It's like, oh, you want the bag? Here it is. But like, I don't know what happened in your day today. I couldn't tell you anybody in your family's name. I'm not paying attention to you or I'm not present with you. And I think that's been one of the bigger lessons in my big age in dating, that I have definitely learned is like, there's some things you cannot buy.
Yes.
And those, that's one of them. I think love for sure is one of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had a similar feeling when I met my now husband, but it was like, I could have given you like the list of all the qualities I would hope for in a partner, all the things that I thought I wanted. But then there was like this other like 10, 15% of things I just wouldn't have even known how to articulate or ask for because I didn't even know that was possible, like all rolled into one. I have a friend who put it like, I thought it was gonna be like an a la carte menu. I didn't know I could have the whole thing, like.
Well, I was dating like it was a la carte.
I mean, weren't we all?
Yeah. I was like, I'll take him because he has these 3, and I'll take him, he has these 2, and I'm just not going to commit. Like, I'm just going to be out, But to your point, like, I didn't know I could have all those things rolled up into one.
I mean, and I think that's the thing too, is like, who has time for that? Like you're booked, you're busy.
I mean, I'm blessed that he's successful and he's able to go with me where I'm going for work. And so he was with me in LA for the Grammys and he was with me in Ojai for New Balance and he's with me in Milwaukee when I go there and we make it work. We're very, I think, intentional about that. We commit to FaceTiming every day and it's a hard thing for sure. But I'm like, because we live, this long distance.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but if we lived in the same city, like, I don't know if you'd see me more.
Totally.
That's just the reality of my life.
Yeah, and also like knowing what you need and like being independent, being, out here running shit. I mean, it's also important to find times to soften and to know when you can just like kind of unfurl a little bit, and having someone who brings that out for you and you can do the same for them. That's nice. That softness is not to be taken for granted.
I know. Listen, I'm softer than I ever been in my life,
I
Lauren.
know. But and it shows
Even my
though.
kids.
Yeah.
My
Oh my
kids are like,
gosh.
you're so nice now. I'm like, oh, I'm just so happy.
Happiness is the antidote sometimes, and
It is.
yeah. And especially when you've been through it. Okay. So let's talk about True to Size. And I think that even before you started that in 2020, you had a sold out collab with Reebok in 2019. I mean, there was this big lead up. It just felt like, okay, Jazz, we're watching. We see you're doing big things. What's next? And you're like, oh, what's next? Here, I've launched a sneaker-based consulting agency. Hello. Talk to me a little bit about that kind of moment of evolution for you.
It's one I ran from for a really long time. I think that I was really comfortable playing the two, and I played a really good two. I can support somebody else in their dreams and write the roadmap for them and do all that. And I loved that part of it, but there was a big fear of being the one. And I ran from that for so long. Even after the sneaker dropped, I was like, okay, maybe I'll just design more shoes. But then the pandemic happened. Yeah. I think like my sneaker dropped in September 2019, and we shut the world down in March of 2020. And so I had a lot of plans and projects booked that I thought my life would take me in a very different direction, more influencer, content creator, designer type of vibe, which has never been even really my passion. Like I really like the behind the scenes, putting the pieces together part. And so I was going to ride the wave and do that, but the pandemic happened and I sat back and I was like, okay, well, honestly, my brain is like the best asset that I have, and I can do that from anywhere with the world closed down. I just need somebody to give me a project to think on. And Palladium ended up coming in, and they were our first kind of client to get the ball rolling. And Palladium, they worked on special projects. So we did celebrity collabs with them. We opened up women's business. They're a French-based brand, and they were launching in the US in reaction to a huge influx of US consumer Gen Z girls. And so they had us kind of, design for that first collection that they would do just for the US girl. And we spent a year just designing and playing around with things. And that kind of got me to thinking like, okay, this could be a business. But I think it was for sure something that had to happen. Like I didn't feel like I was jumping into it. It felt like I kind of backed into this corner, but it was the corner that everybody was like, eventually you're going to do this thing. We saw it with Sophia Chang and her ending up going on and having a very great, thriving entrepreneur business, and Melody Asani and being able to work with brands, but also have a thriving business on her own. And so the Rihannas of the world, I think that this has been women drop shoes and then a business comes after is what we've typically seen.
Yeah.
And so I kind of backed into a corner that people saw for me for a long time, and I was scared. I had a lot of fear and imposter syndrome, but I firmly believe that if I'm in the position, then like I'm going to go balls to the wall and just see what happens.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Here we are. I mean, you stayed pretty busy during the pandemic. I mean, other people were chilling in sweatpants, and whether or not you were wearing sweatpants, you were not chilling. I mean, you were definitely like turning out content. You were really creating partnerships left and right. I mean, how did your output in terms of your work change through that transition? Not even just speaking to the pandemic, but really to launching this thing that you didn't even plan to launch. Did you feel like you were working backwards the whole time? Like when did it start to feel like you were facing forwards again?
I would say it still doesn't feel that way because the world has changed so much. I think we launched at the beginning of 2020, and then I secured a $1,000 deal, and it was working on retail, and then the pandemic happened. So we lost the original funding for the business. And so I was kind of just like, I'm going to do whatever I can to feed my kids. And thank God it was things like I worked with Pinterest for the first time that year. We worked with Palladium. I worked with K-Swiss. We worked with Adidas a ton that year. I think that I was blessed that in our business, I would say 95% of our work is inbound. And so a lot of people believed in me, and that helped with the confidence. Like if people are coming in-house to ask me to do something and it's consistently bringing a check in, I should probably formalize this thing.
Yeah.
And I met with a professional coach at Inbound. I went to the Inbound HubSpot marketing conference. I met with the coach there, and they kind of just encouraged me to figure out what type of projects I wanted to work on and to create that differentiator.
Yeah.
And so I just took a look at all of the things people were coming in to ask me to do. And most of them had to do with women or young Black people. And so I kind of chose that. I said, okay, well, other people's confidence allowed me to meet them where they were with myself, to say, okay, well, I guess if all these people think that I'm great at it, I must be pretty good. So let me give it everything I have.
Even there, the imposter syndrome, come on. Like, even if you don't think I'm great, I must be pretty good. Like, you're fucking awesome. Like, we all know that.
Thank
Like,
you.
yes, absolutely. I mean, thinking about that and like what you've been able to, receive in terms of information and really peeling the curtain back on a lot of companies that you're working with, what would you say, kind of generally speaking, do companies generally get wrong about their approach to brand partnerships and bringing their brand into more experiential physical spaces?
I would say it's like checking that fit. And I think that's what really created the company, is my business coach saying, like, you need to sit down and write out your process. Like, because I'm thinking I'm not doing anything special. So he's like, no, every single thing you do, you need to write it down. And what I noticed that I was doing was checking those connections for everything somebody had put in front of me. And I think that's what brands, the more I was working with brands, I would see that a lot of them do not believe in cross-sectional teams. And it was just such a mind fuck for me to be like, wow, so marketing has no idea about what product is doing. Like,
Yeah, they're just working in silos.
Yeah. And nobody's talking to each other. Like, so I would be in situations where I would be working with the marketing team, and the design team would bring us a product and say, hey, this shoe is called XYZ. And I would say, why is it called XYZ? And they would say, we don't know. We just called it that. And I'm like, okay, like, so what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, what do you want me to do with that? Yeah.
And they're like, just make something up. And I'm like, wow, okay, like there's a problem, because I know that a designer did not go into this with no mood board or no inspo or, but there's no communication in between the teams. And that's really where I try to live. I try to really look at where the pain points are, and if we can give you a roadmap to resolve it, and if we can actually activate that for you.
Yeah. And I think like anytime you're working with different brands, you're trying to get, like I said, you're trying to get under the hood quickly. You're trying to understand what their needs are, and you're trying to, also set them apart. I mean, do you have anything like weird or funny that has happened in these brand partnership settings that you can speak on?
Yeah, I would say, like, we were working with a brand regarding their mission once, and they couldn't figure out, like, why does everybody in this room, they won't believe and they can't get into our mission? And they had the word fitness in their mission. And so when we went around the room, and it's a global meeting, so it's like Asia and every market is in the meeting, and they define fitness, and every single person has a different definition of fitness. And so one person's saying, oh, it's like running a marathon. Another person's saying, oh, it's only if you play a team sport. Another person is saying fitness is holistic and includes mental health. Another person is saying, like, fitness is only fitness if it's competitive. And so, like, it showed me so quickly that even in the top leadership positions, like, these very granular conversations are not being had, and how much that affects the business. Because if you feel like fitness is yoga and you feel like fitness is football, and you're developing two totally different marketing plans, like, how that's why you have a problem. That's why nobody believes in your mission. That's why nobody can feel it, because it's not cohesive, and even here in this room. And that was like one of the biggest, I would say, eye-openers for me, in the fact that a lot of these problems can be solved with conversation, and really about creating the space for those conversations to be had.
Yeah. I think like the one thing that when we were talking about things that we should talk about today. You said the importance of representation, in marketing, and the importance of representation, even in the rooms that are creating the marketing, right? Like we've all seen that disconnect. And on the episode where I hosted Massaer, like we talked a lot about the representation where like Gucci or H&M are like, how did that shit get made? It's like, well, because it was a homogenous room of people who were all saying yes to each other. And there was no one there to point out like, hey, we're totally forgetting about this group, or we're being very US centric in our lens here. Talk a little bit about like where your agency really kind of interjects that representation. I know you talked a lot about women. You also talked about Black people wanting to have representation there. What are the kind of specifics that like you focus on different communities, or are you focused on a bigger global aperture for these companies? What's sort of your approach?
I think in the beginning, when we first started, a lot of people brought us in to have these like lunch and learns where we would, talk
That's
about
cute.
why like talk about why you should be inclusive in your business over lunch for an hour and a half. And what I have found doing this work is that it's not like other types of work, which is a lot of selling.
Yeah.
You really have to change somebody's heart. Like you have to change their heart and get them to understand, like, yes, number one, how it affects your bottom line, but two, how it affects the perception of your business, the people in your business, the feelings of the people that are working in this company, so in these walls. All that really, really matters. But unfortunately, a lot of the people that you're trying to talk to, stakeholders, they honestly do not care. They don't. It's so you have to change a heart. And so there's a different type of approach. There's a different type of finessing, that you have to do in those types of circumstances. And it's honestly, I think, why you see so much burnout amongst like Black-owned businesses, women-founded businesses, specifically in this space, because it is a constant fight. I tend to get other budgets that are $400,000, $500,000 for, oh, we're just doing this new product. But when it comes to Black History Month and to Women's History Month, I get like $15,000 to $20,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so even the allocations, make it really, really difficult. You have to really want to do this work, to want to do this work. But for me, I've seen so much impact from my little space in the world and being able to create so much opportunity. At True to Size, we build teams true to size. And so I will lead every project that we work on, but every team is built niche and specific for the voice of that project. And so what the beauty for me, I think, about my business is that it is a lot of young people of color specifically, first opportunity to work on a big brand moment, a campaign, an activation, a digital piece, a YouTube story. Like this is their first time being able to show and be in the room and be paid for their work. And I think that has been kind of the space that I want to end my career in. Is I don't necessarily need to work on everything, but if I ever want to sit down, other people have to be at the table. And I think that for me is the most important thing, is just making sure I'm allowing space for people to build tables.
Yeah. I mean, I think even looking early, like this time last year, there was a really big upheaval. I mean, in the iconic M&M's bunch, and there was a pretty big shakeup with all the M&Ms going separate ways and having their own personalities. And there was a really big upheaval when Green decided to swap out her boots for some sneakers. But that was a good opportunity for you to team up and step in. Let's talk about what was it like to work with Green?
Green is amazing. Oh my. And it was like such a wild thing too, to be like, I got the assets and like, it's Green on the phone talking to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what a moment. And I mean, it was the first time that M&M's did a rebrand in the history of the brand. So it was such a milestone moment, I feel like, in my career for me to kind of design, but be on a more commercial side. It was for the Super Bowl, and then we ended up with a cover story for People magazine. It was so amazing kind of to be a part of something that I grew up watching, a Super Bowl advertising moment. And I think that also was, for me, it was two-part. It was like one of the most amazing pieces of work that I've done. And then on the other hand, I also saw how the world was not ready. Mm-hmm. The amount of pushback in that campaign. I mean, I had death threats on TikTok. I had multiple sexual assault threats on Instagram. Like they had to shut my comments off because there were just so many people, very conservative people, that were upset about Green wearing sneakers and what does this mean about her sexuality and what does this, what does this mean? Like, why is she not feminine? Men, grown men, upset that they couldn't think about fucking the green M&M anymore. And
Disgusting.
like, that's my fault. So
yeah, and you're like, and
kind
that's
of
my problem how?
That's
like,
my problem now.
yeah.
But it honestly put this big fire in me. Like, I'm sometimes in an echo chamber, I guess, where like, yeah, I know that people are not there yet, but wow, they're really not there yet. When the ad has millions of views, and you can see that, okay, well, there's still a lot of work to be done. And to me, that's like very inspiring. It means that my work is necessary and that more people at the table is also more than necessary.
Yeah. And I think also like that's the thing with, social is like there's sort of there's the upside of like how like the virality of things and how quickly, something can gain momentum. And then there's obviously the other part of it. I mean, how do you advise, our listeners, like when it comes to social, like that constant posting, that constant feedback? It's like the feedback chamber is always open unless you turn off the comments. How do you kind of deal with that? How do you recharge from that? And what advice could you give to somebody who might be experiencing that on their own?
The biggest piece is like, I kind of, my life opened up accidentally. Like I said on Twitter, hey, this is Jazzy from Picks on Fire. And all of a sudden, thousands of people went to my Instagram to find me. And I'm just like a mom posting my meals and like not posting my sneakers at all. I wasn't using it was very personal to me and my family and all of this. And so in hindsight, like I really wish that I would have chosen things to keep private for myself that I could just love.
Yeah.
And that didn't have anything attached to it, that weren't part of the brand. I'm very, very intentional these days because it's been so long with like my family, with my relationship, of like how much I'm sharing, because I want to keep these things very pure and very protected. And so I feel like you have to have a separation between the curated view of yourself, Nerd Like Jazzy, and like what's happening in the Nerd Like Jazzy world. But Jazerai and Nerd Like Jazzy are not the same people. Nerd Like Jazzy is a very curated, very, very curated view of who Jazerai is. And I think having that separation, even if you are not a influencer, but you're the director of a company that is very, very well known, people are going to know who you are. They're going to look up on LinkedIn. They're going to know your business profile. And there has to be some type of separation between who you are in your real life to the people that you love and who you are to the world.
Yeah, it's so interesting you bring that up. I have always, sort of vacillated. I generally have had a private Instagram and I like to keep things private for my personal life. And, after I got married and right up until early on in my pregnancy, was like, I'll try being public for a while. And I just really hated it. I felt like people had way too much information about me, way too much knowledge of me. I mean, I just felt like the need to like bring it all in. And, I have boundaries in my life. There's certain people that I don't fuck with, and there's also, my professional life, which is not my personal life. My podcast is not my personal life. It's not my professional life. It sits somewhere in the middle, right? But it's like, these are my opinions. These are my points of view, and knowing when the boundaries are and just not feeling bad about it. Like that's the thing for me is I'm just like, if you feel left out, then maybe like you should try to be my friend. And if I am not interested, then like, go find somebody else to look at on the internet. I'm not that interesting. Like,
it's also hard for the family too, though. Like my mom the other day is like, you haven't posted a picture of me on Instagram.
Oh my God.
Like, Mom, this is not for you. This is a business channel. Like, I don't just put my coffee up here. Okay.
She's like, well, Teddy Ruxpin got a pretty big spread. So no. Sorry, Mama.
I know. She's going to be like, and Teddy got a slider. Like,
I mean, yeah, it's hard. And it's like the time goes by so fast too that I'm like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, we had these really cute photos done with our baby back in November. And I'm like, it doesn't even look like the same kid anymore. He has more hair. He looks totally, I'm like, I'm not even going to post these. Cause like
Yeah.
by the time I
Forget
get
it.
around to posting, I'm like, what am I doing this all for? You know? And it's like,
The moment's gone.
yeah, I'm just trying to live as much as possible in the present and share those kind of personal moments with people that I want in my personal life. Like it's a good thing to have those boundaries. What other values, I think boundaries are a big one. What other values are really important to you when you think about the kind of business you want to be known for having?
The kind that treats people fairly, but beyond will nuance for their life. I think that that's what I have really appreciated in the places that I've been. I know that when we knew each other, like people, you want me to go on a project for a week, but I have two small kids and like it's going to cost me $500 to have a nanny come in. So how bad do you want me to be there?
Right.
How important is it that I'm there? Because it's going to be a little bit more of an investment. And I'm grateful that like people were willing to make that investment in me, but it took for me to speak up about the nuances in my life that I needed, maybe that other people may not need. And so it really means a lot to me to create that type of environment for the women that I work with, because I predominantly work with women of color, queer women as well. And so it's like, well, I want to make sure that you have the freedom to figure out if you have this thing in your life. I've had the unfortunate realities of our life, like people's moms passing away or needing to be a caretaker for a parent or having a family member with a family emergency. Like, I want to be able to create space for people to not feel like they're going to lose their job because something out of control is happening in their life. And that they, especially people that really have a desire to be in it. And I think that if it's something so small, in the grand scheme of things, like paying for your nanny so that you can come to work, your job should be willing to do that. Your job should be willing to meet you where you're at, and create a comfortable, holistic place for you to be, especially in this type of work. I think we travel a lot where there's sometimes production long days, 14-hour days. We require a lot from people, specifically women in this business. And so we should be just as soft with them when we ask that of them.
I think you're really speaking to something that's such a big, part of the conversation right now. And, the US is just so far behind when it comes to family care and leave and, being able to, get coverage when it comes to work or our transition back. And, something I get asked, coaching a lot of clients is like, oh, we have people who came back from parental leave and like, they're really not, as strong of effort as we've seen in the past before they went on leave. And I'm like, what did you do to set them up? Before they went out? What did you do to bring them back? Did you offer them a transition? Did you give them a safe place to land? Did you check in on anything? No. Okay. Well, that's probably why they're not as successful right now, or why they're struggling with their work, and I think that, we're just so far behind. And, I saw Ashley Graham recently posted a video where she's talking about people ask like, how do you balance, motherhood and your career? And she's like, is anybody asking men, like, how are you balancing fatherhood and your career? No one.
I mean, that's people, oftentimes I work on Mother's Day in this business, and people oftentimes are like, I can't believe you work on Mother's Day. I can't believe that you work on your birthday. And I'm like, it's so weird that nobody in the NBA or nobody's asking these men, like, you're working on a holiday. I can't believe you got to play on a holiday.
Steph,
or like,
it's your birthday. Are you sure you're going to play in the game? Yeah.
Like, nobody says that to men.
It's so true.
It's a very common narrative. And there are things that I'm very transparent with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are the hard lines that they need me to be here. And here's sometimes that mom has to work, but we agreed upon those things. I've never worked All-Star Weekend. My son's birthday is that weekend, so there are things that constantly checking in with them to make sure. In 2022, I was on the road for 7 months out of the year. Not consistently, but like I was gone 4 days, I'd come home 2. I'd be gone 3 days, I'd come home 1.
Yeah.
And towards the end of that, 7 with my younger son was like, I don't want to be away from you anymore. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm already contracted, so you're coming with me now for the rest of this year.
Would you like an internship starting tomorrow?
Yeah. Yes. Like, you don't want to be away from me. I already signed the contracts, the compromises. We go together now, and
I love that.
And next year I will only work up to 50%. And it's constantly checking in with them I think as to make sure that my kids feel comfortable. Outside of that, I really don't give a fuck like who's comfortable and who's not.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, priorities. And I think like,
Hmm.
so, I wish I had you all day. I mean, we could just chop it up forever, but I'm curious, what are some of the things like, cause now your sons are at the age where they are either starting to work or probably dipping their toes into that. What has been kind of the thing that you're most hopeful for as they set out on their own career paths? And I know you're a hard worker, and I'm sure that seeing that much of their life, they know that there's a grind involved, but what else, have you really shared with them?
I want them to like do what they love. And that's the reason I think a lot of times I wanted to go back and like get a job at the fucking bank and be like a teller, but I'm like, I could never imagine my kids seeing that I did all this.
Swaggiest teller there ever
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
I didn't want them to see that I did all this to give up. And I also wanted them to have a front row seat of like what it really looks like when you chase a dream. Like it's going to be fucked up at times. Like it's not always just a consistent trickle up. Like it's more like this, like a little like stop chart, like it's really honestly what it feels like and looks like. And for them to see me not get knocked down and come back stronger and to know that it will always be okay. But at the end of it, like you have to do what you love. My older son chose not to go to college. I totally understood that given the fact that he was an athlete who lost his senior season thanks to the pandemic. He was not motivated to go, and he never thought that this would be his situation. And so I'm like, you know what? You want to work in sneakers? Let's try to make that happen. And he was able to get an internship at Overtime, and now he's in a full-time position
Oh my gosh.
as an on-air sneaker reporter at Overtime Kicks. And this is his dream job at his favorite outlet.
That's
And I
amazing.
think when I look at them, I can't be the parent that's saying, I'm disappointed in you because you didn't choose college. How many 22-year-olds are working in their dream job at one of the biggest media outlets in sports? I'm like, you can always go back to school. Just
That's right.
give this all you got. And my younger son is an artist. He's a producer. He's already dropped his first album. He wants to go to music college. He has 1 year left in high school, and that's what we're going to do. I'm going to continue to invest in the things that they love as long as they continue to show up.
I love that so much. And I also think like, what a good message if my parents had given me that message. I mean, I had my own plan, my own path going anyways, but without having that resistance, like, in some ways it pushed me to stay true to myself because I was like, you're giving me an ultimatum. I'm going to do the opposite of what you want. Right. Like a true creative. But also, if I'd had the support, like how much further could I have pushed it, and I think that it took me a long time, my early 20s to really figure that out for myself. But having, everyone should wish for a Jazerai mom. I mean, come on, that's amazing.
And I think that that's the number one thing. I sit down with a lot of young women of all walks of life. And the number one thing they come to me and they say is like, I want to do this thing, but my parents want me to do this thing. And I have to tell them like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Your mom's not going to talk to you for a year.
Totally.
It's that's what, so what? I hate to say it like that.
That year's going to go by real fast. Yeah.
It's going to go by real fast.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. I promise you.
You'll find another mom. You'll be fine. Yeah. You'll be good. Yeah.
You'll be good. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But it's so scary. And I remember being that. Like, I wanted to go to FINM after high school. And I think that too. Like, how much different would my life have been if I went to FINM at 19 and didn't have all these other college, trials and in the real world, trying to follow my parents' dream.
Yeah.
And I think that everything happened the way it was supposed to. I wonder too, like, what I would have done with all this in my 20s and in my early 30s. Like, I think the long game is so crucial. I know a lot of people who are like 25 and at the height of their career, and you have to continue to scale up from there.
Yeah.
And to scale up until you're 60, till you're 70. Like, that's intense. So I'm very blessed that it's been a long road for real. And I hope my kids see that it's a long road too.
I mean, yeah, if you're going to 60, you definitely got some time on the clock. So you're good. Yeah, you're totally good.
Yeah.
Just a couple final questions for you. Where can folks go to learn more about you, learn about True to Size? Where should we direct them to? We'll definitely drop it in the show notes. And I think that we probably need to put Zion's, show in there too.
Yes, I know. You can find me on Instagram. It's Nerd Like Jazzy. And the agency is True to Size. And on X, Twitter, as I'm still calling it. I am Jazerai, A-E, like Raekwon. And yeah, I think that my son is Overtime Zion, and he hosts the sneaker shows on their social feeds at Overtime Kicks.
He's like a born voice for hosting. Also, I was listening and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like so natural. So, it's like when you see someone who's really in their bag, i.e. you, and also Zion, it's really cool to see that and just like hear it.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
And here with you. Okay.
Thank you.
I was like, look at Lauren, the podcaster. Okay.
I mean, listen, give me a microphone and I'll keep talking, right? Like, oh God. At least people can opt in on this one. But I mean, what is one final thought you want to leave our listeners with today? I feel like you've dropped so much wisdom, so much guidance, but how could we summarize it if possible?
Oh man, I don't know. I like to encourage people to live loud.
Yeah.
Like, that's my sister and I say that to each other all the time. Like, live loud. You're only going to do this once. Like, go balls to the wall. Get your ideas out, like, do it. Live loud. Live as loud as you can. I think that the world has attempted to silence women for so long that we have a voice. There's a space for us to use it. So it's time to scream. It's a rebel yell.
I love that so much. Jazerai, thank you for joining me today. This has been so special just to sit down and get the full deets.
Thank you so much for having me and for asking me. It was so good to spend this afternoon with you.
I agree. Well, this has been another episode of Don't Fuck This Up, the podcast answering the ultimate question, how the fuck did you land that cool job? I'm your host, Lauren Alvarez, and we'll talk to you next week. Don't Fuck This Up is a podcast written, produced, and edited by Lauren Alvarez. New episodes dropping every Wednesday. Be sure to follow, rate, and review this and every episode. And until next week, please keep it together and try your best not to fuck this up.